Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We are working on the troublesome reign of King John, and we get to hear from Philip Falconbridge, otherwise known as the Bastard, today in Act 1, Scene 1. So when we kicked off, we had somebody from France coming to tell King John that Arthur has the better claim to the throne and has the backing of France, so John should give up his crown and titles and all that to Arthur. John was like, obviously no. But he told his crew, start mustering the army and make sure that Chatillon doesn't get back to France too quickly, because we'd like our army to show up in France without them having a whole lot of warning to get there. So once all of that is underway, we had the brothers Robert and Philip Falconbridge come in with their mother. And the dispute between the two brothers is Robert claims that he is the rightful heir because Philip is an illegitimate child. And his proof for why Philip is an illegitimate child has to do with timing. His father was away. The king, the former king, Richard the Lionheart, had come to their house, and once his father got back, his mom gave birth to a child, but it was like 6 weeks early. And also, by the way, doesn't Philip look exactly like Richard the Lionheart instead of Robert Falconbridge? And Lady Falconbridge is very traumatized by this whole thing. She's like, please just let me leave. I don't want to be stuck in the middle of all of this. And King John and Queen Eleanor are like, there's loads of reasons why maybe a baby came early, and because when your mother and father were together, your mother was thinking about the king instead of her husband Robert, and that's why Philip looks like the king instead of looking like his actual father, Sir Robert Falconbridge, which still just tickles me that that's how they think genetics worked. So it finally comes around to the king says, all right, we're going to ask Lady Falconbridge 3 times who Philip's father is. So they ask her, and she's like, it was Falconbridge. It was my husband, Robert Falconbridge. And they turn to Philip and they're like, okay, who was your father? And he's like, well, that's an interesting question. They're like, who was your father? And he's like, well, the man who was closest by when I was being brought up was Sir Robert Falconbridge, so it must be Sir Robert Falconbridge. And they're like, who is your father? And just a little heads up, the vast majority of this monologue is an aside. So it's like they just wanted to do a voiceover of what was going through Philip's head, and they gave him this monologue to do it, but presume that nobody else in the room hears what he's saying except for the very first line. So Philip says, Philippus atavis edite regibus. What sayest thou, Philip, sprung of ancient kings? Quo me repeat tempestas? What wind of honor blows this fury forth? Or whence proceed these fumes of majesty? Methinks I hear a hollow echo sound, that Philip is the son unto a king. The whistling leaves upon the trembling trees whistle in concert, I am Richard's son. The bubbling murmur of the water's fall records Philippus regis filius. Birds in their flight make music with their wings, filling the air with the glory of my birth. Birds, bubbles, leaves, and mountains echo, all ring in mine ears that I am Richard's son. Fond man, whither art thou carried? How are thy thoughts wrapped in honor's heaven? Forgetful what thou art and whence thou camest? Thy father's land cannot maintain these thoughts. These thoughts are far unfitting Falconbridge. And well they may, for why this mounting mind doth soar too high to stoop to Falconbridge. Why, how now, knowest thou where thou art, and knowest thou who expects thine answer here? Wilt thou, upon a frantic, maddening vein, go lose thy land and say thyself base-born? No, keep thy land. Though Richard were thy sire, whate'er thou thinkst, say thou art Falconbridge. So this is an interesting insight into the character of the bastard in this version of the play. In Shakespeare's, King John, he doesn't get to say any of this. He does sort of acknowledge that maybe he looks more like Richard the Lionheart, but this whole like internal monologue of am I, aren't I, doesn't exist. So it's an interesting snapshot that is great character building for whoever ends up playing the bastard in this. But he's saying that he has this feeling like deep in his bones, and he's getting messages from everything in nature all around him that he is more than the son of Sir Robert Falconbridge. He is the son of a king. He hears it on the winds, and he feels like the birds are singing songs saying that he is the son of King Richard the Lionheart. But then he's like, seriously, I can't be thinking this kind of stuff. Like, nobody that came from Falconbridge's home could ever have thoughts or aspirations like these. And he's like, well, then maybe that's kind of the point of it is, I do have those. So maybe I really am Richard's son instead of Robert's son. And then he's like, wait a second, this is stupid. If I maintain that I'm a Falconbridge, then I am the rightful heir and I will get to keep the land and the inheritance and all those sort of things. If I say that I'm not a Falconbridge, I'm going to lose all that. And that's a really stupid move. So he's like, whatever thoughts are going on in my head, whatever feelings I have, whatever messages I'm getting from nature and the universe and all of that, I just need to answer right now that I'm a Falconbridge. So once this is done, the king sort of snaps him back to it and is like, Philip, who is your father? And he's like, well, it's Falconbridge. It's obviously Falconbridge. But then he has another moment of, can I do this? Do I deny my actual father? I can't deny who I actually am. And then he's like, wait a second. Actually, no, I changed my answer. I am the son of King Richard the Lionheart. And they're all like, whoa. And Robert Falconbridge, the younger, is like, well, that settles that. That means that I get my lands and all of that. So Queen Eleanor is like, why would you give all of that up for? And Philip is like, because I have to be honest. I have to be true to who I am and what I know to be true. And I know that I am King Richard the Lionheart's son. And Queen Eleanor's like, no worries. Like, I'm your grandmother then. And I had this feeling that was the case anyway. So this is great. And you'll be part of our family now. And King John has him kneel down and he dubs him Sir Richard Plantagenet so that he can claim his rightful name and all of that. And John's like, all right, now that that's settled, let's get ready to go to France so that we can invade and I can squash this whole Arthur thing that's going on. So everybody leaves except for Philip the Bastard, who's still just going to be called Bastard, even though he's been renamed Richard Plantagenet. He's still just going to be called Bastard through the rest of the show. It's just him and his mother left on stage, and he's like, Mom, can I ask you a question? And will you be honest with me? And she's like, what is it that you need? Is it money? And he's like, no, it's not money. I have a very important question that I need to ask you. And she's like, what is it? And he's going to ask it in the form of a monologue that we will hear tomorrow. So tacking on the comparison bit between this and Shakespeare's version of the play, this is all sort of happening backwards. In Shakespeare's version of the play, the bastard doesn't have that internal monologue thing. He doesn't first say, they don't even ask him who his dad is. That whole exchange doesn't happen. And it's Eleanor who actually sort of picks him and is like, you know what? If you want to give up all of your lands, you can join our family and we will say that you are the son of King Richard the Lionheart. And he takes that deal, so because that's a better deal than the inheritance that he would have gotten as Sir Robert Falconbridge's son, and he is dubbed Sir Richard Plantagenet, and then they go off to France. And there is a conversation between Lady Falconbridge and Philip at this point in the play. It's going to have a slightly different tenor, but we're going to get into that a little bit more tomorrow. All you need to know going into tomorrow is in this version of the play, Philip is like, Mom, I gotta ask you a question. She's like, what is it? And we will hear the question tomorrow. I'll see you then. Mwah.